It was late at night. The clock in the car read 1:45 a.m. I was driving home after a tiring night shift. The highway stretched out before me, deserted and desolate. The dim streetlights cast shadows on the road, creating strange shapes that made me shiver. The space was quiet, only the steady sound of the engine and the wind whistling through the window. The cold feeling crept in my mind, making me a little more awake. My tired eyes tried to focus on the road ahead. Only about 30 minutes left until we got home. Driving at steady speed, I suddenly saw an object from afar, lying precariously in the middle of the lane. Curious, I slowed down and took a closer look. It was an old silver-black suitcase, scratched and covered in dust. The suitcase was lying right in the middle of the road, as if someone had intentionally placed it there. What gave me goosebumps was that it was placed neatly, facing my car, as if waiting. The surroundings were completely silent. I looked through the rearview mirror, not seeing anyone. A cold wind blew by. I could clearly feel the damp and cold air. I was about to step on the gas to leave behind, but then I was drawn to the mystery of the suitcase. Just as I was about to turn the car around, a light knock came from inside the suitcase. The knocking was steady, as if someone was trying to escape. Knock, knock, knock. I held my breath and listened, my heart pounding in my chest. The headlights of the car were shining directly on the suitcase, making it stand out in the deserted street. The suitcase shook slightly, then stood still as if nothing had happened. But only a few seconds later, a faint whisper began to echo. The whisper was very unpleasant, like the sobbing of a child. "Please, save me, let me go." The voice was trembling, full of despair, sending a chill down my spine. I couldn't ignore it. My curiosity and compassion urged me to check. I pulled over, the headlights still shining directly on the suitcase. A chill spread through my body, but I couldn't leave. I got off the car, my legs trembling as I approached the suitcase. The surrounding space was eerily quiet, with only the sound of the wind whistling through the trees along the road. Standing in front of the suitcase, I hesitated for a moment. It was still lying quietly on the road, but it felt like there were invisible eyes watching my every move. I bent down, my hands trembling as I grabbed the zipper. As soon as I touched it, the suitcase shook more violently. The pounding inside became more intense, as if someone was panicking and trying to escape. The whispering voice now turned into a scream. "Please, let me go. Don't leave me here." My heart pounding, I pulled the zipper open. An unpleasant, musty smell wafted up, forcing me to step back. But when I looked inside, I was stunned. Inside the suitcase were only a pile of old cloth and a few old wooden toys. But when I bent down to look more closely, among the pile of rags, a pale face suddenly appeared, deep black eyes staring straight at me. I screamed and fell backwards. The suitcase slammed shut unexpectedly, making a deafening sound. I panicked and stepped back, trying to stand up, but my trembling legs wouldn't listen. When I looked back, the suitcase was lying still on the road, without any signs of anything unusual. But those deep black eyes were still clearly visible in my mind, as if watching me from somewhere in the darkness. I ran to my car in a panic, slammed the door shut, and locked it. But as soon as I started the car, a loud banging sound came from the trunk behind me. Knock, knock, knock. I looked in the rearview mirror, and the suitcase was now sitting right on the back seat, the lid of the suitcase shaking slightly. No one had opened it. No one had moved it into my car. I screamed, stepped on the gas, and sped forward, trying to escape this haunting road. But no matter how fast I drove, the banging sound followed, echoing in my head. When I got home, I rushed out of the car, ran straight into the house, and locked the door. But when I looked out the window, the suitcase was still on the back seat, silent and scary. At that moment, the deep black eyes appeared in my mind again. The pale lips parted to whisper, "Thank you for bringing me home." I panicked and backed away, feeling like those eyes were looking straight at me from the darkness. Since that night, I have never driven on that highway at night again. And the suitcase, no one knows when it disappeared or where it went. Late at night, I drove home after a long day of exhausting work. The clock in the car read 2:15 a.m. The deserted highway stretched endlessly before my eyes, with only grasslands and rows of trees on both sides, pitch black in the night. The surrounding space was eerily quiet. The sound of the wind whistling through the window was like a distant whisper. I turned on the headlights to the highest setting, the light penetrating the thin fog, creating a dim and eerie scene. A feeling of unease crept into my mind, but I reassured myself that it was just fatigue after a long day. I sped up to get home soon, wishing to quickly escape the cold and loneliness of this deserted road. Driving at a steady speed, I suddenly saw a figure standing on the side of the road, his back turned to me. The headlights of the car shone directly on the tall and thin figure, wearing a long black coat, covering most of his body. I slowed down, my eyes never leaving that figure. Why was there someone standing here at this hour? There was no broken car, no signal lights. Just as I was about to drive past, the man slowly turned around. His face was pale and emotionless, his deep black eyes staring blankly at me. His gaze was not human, but cold and lifeless like a soulless corpse. I felt my whole body go cold, my heart pounding as if it was about to jump out of my chest. The gaze seemed to pierce through me, making me stiff and unable to move. I shook my head to get rid of the feeling of horror and stepped on the gas and sped forward, leaving the strange man behind. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I couldn't see him anymore. I breathed a sigh of relief, trying to calm myself down that it was just a tired hallucination. But when I turned back to look ahead, the man was standing right in the middle of the road, just a few meters away from my car. I panicked and slammed on the brakes. The car skidded on the road and stopped right in front of him. But when I looked closely, I couldn't see him anymore. There was only a hazy fog covering the empty road. A cold feeling spread throughout my body. I blinked a few times, wondering if I was dreaming. But no, this was real. Just as I was about to start the car and leave, the right side window knocked lightly. I turned around in surprise and saw the man standing outside, his face pressed against the glass, his deep black eyes staring at me unblinkingly. His voice was hoarse and resonant, as if coming from underground. "Give me a ride, just a little." I froze, speechless. How could he move so fast? How could he appear here? The man knocked lightly on the glass again, his deep black eyes staring at me, as if trying to suck my soul inside. I tried to calm myself down and shouted, "Go away." Immediately, his face distorted, his mouth opened into a crooked smile that stretched to his ears, revealing sharp teeth like blades. I panicked and stepped on the gas. The car shot straight ahead at a terrifying speed. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, the man was chasing me, running on all fours like a wild animal. He moved extremely fast, his black eyes never leaving me. His hoarse laughter echoed throughout the space, repeating the phrase, "Give me a ride, just a little bit." I stepped on the gas harder. The clock needle showed more than 120 kilometers per hour, but he still followed closely behind, his long arms trying to touch my car. My heart was pounding. Cold sweat poured down my body. I screamed in panic, trying to escape this terrifying nightmare. I saw the streetlights ahead, the sign of a residential area. I pressed the accelerator with all my might, driving straight into the light. As soon as my car crossed the boundary of the light, the man disappeared. The raucous laughter also stopped, leaving only the whistling of the wind and the pounding of my heart in my chest. I slowed down, panting and not daring to look back. I had escaped him, at least for now. When I got home, I locked the door and hid in my bedroom. But when I looked in the mirror, the man's face appeared behind me, his deep black eyes staring over my shoulder. I turned around, but saw no one. There was only the empty room and the dim light. But in the mirror, he was still there, smiling wickedly and whispering, "Give me a ride, just a little bit." I screamed in panic, but the hoarse laughter echoed endlessly, haunting me forever. It was a cold, rainy night as I drove along the deserted highway. The clock read 3 a.m. My eyes were tired and my body was exhausted after a long journey. Sleepiness was creeping up on me, forcing me to find a place to stop and rest. Luckily, I saw a rest stop sign ahead. I breathed a sigh of relief and turned into the large but completely deserted parking lot. There were no other cars, only the dim neon lights shining on the wet road, creating a cold and lonely atmosphere. I turned off the engine, leaned back the seat, intended to take a nap before continuing my journey. But as soon as I closed my eyes, I felt something was wrong. A chill ran down my spine as I suddenly felt someone watching me. I opened my eyes and looked around but saw no one. The parking lot was still empty. Only the light rain was flying in the yellow light. I tried to reassure myself that it was just fatigue and sleepiness. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of a figure standing in the distance, hidden behind a street lamp. I turned my head to look directly, but saw no one. But when I looked in the mirror again, the figure appeared again, standing silently and motionless, just a few meters away from my car. My chest tightened, my breathing became rapid. The figure had no face, just a blurry shape that seemed to be disappearing into the rain. I decided to leave this place immediately. I turned the key and started the car, but the engine wouldn't start. I tried again, but the car was still eerily silent. The rain outside began to fall harder, the rustling sound echoing throughout the space. I looked into the rearview mirror and the figure had moved closer, only a few steps away from my car. I panicked and locked the car door and tried to start it again. The car engine shuddered and made a strange noise before suddenly stopping. When I raised my head, the person was standing right in front of the windshield, looking down at me. The face was white, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just a terrifying void. I froze, unable to breathe. The person slowly raised his hand and tapped lightly on the glass, creating a strange rattling sound like claws scratching the glass. I screamed in panic and stepped on the gas pedal frantically. Suddenly, the car started and rushed forward, but the person remained still, not being hit but disappearing into the rain like a ghost. My heart pounded, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I accelerated, leaving the terrifying rest stop behind. But when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw the person chasing after me, moving on all fours like a wild animal. His speed was unimaginably fast, his long arms stretched out towards my car, his sharp claws scratching the air. His hoarse laughter echoed throughout the space, repeating over and over like a haunting curse. I screamed in fear, stepping on the gas pedal as hard as I could. The clock needle showed more than 130 kilometers per hour, but he was still following closely behind, his empty eyes not leaving me. Finally, I saw the streetlights ahead, signaling that we had entered a residential area. I drove onto the main road, and the figure disappeared as soon as the headlights hit my car. I slowed down, gasping for breath and trying to calm myself. I stopped at a nearby gas station, my hands still shaking as I got out of the car. I went into the bathroom to wash my face, hoping the cold water would help me sober up. But when I looked up in the mirror, I saw the faceless man standing right behind me, his long arms reaching toward me. I screamed in horror and turned around, but there was no one there. There was only the empty bathroom and the faint flicker of fluorescent lights. When I looked back in the mirror, I saw his pale, eyeless, mouthless face replace my own. I ran out of the bathroom, jumped into my car, and drove away in a panic. But all the way home, I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror, afraid that the pale face was still staring at me from behind. When I got home, I locked the door and hid in the bedroom, but the knocking on the glass door still rang out regularly outside, as if he had followed me home. I crawled under the covers, closed my eyes, and covered my ears, but the hoarse laughter still echoed in my head, haunting me forever.